Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to welcome you to our board meeting tonight. We apologize for getting started 5 minutes late, but we'd like to go ahead and get started. It is Tuesday, June 13th, 2023, and we are going to begin by indicating who is here. Julie?
Julie Jackson.
Kevin Chandler.
Connie Burgess.
Chris Wynn.
Karen Winder.
Clark Nelson.
Todd Hauber. Rich Nye.
And Nicole McDermott. All right. We're going to go ahead first and start with, I want to start with introductions. GA, Michelle, we see you here, and a bunch of people, Jessica and company. Go ahead and introduce. And Jessica. Thank you for being here. Sorry. A real quick minute. No, that's not what I wanted.
I want a shirt that says Public School Made Me. Wherever you got that, I need to know.
All right, and then do we have our secretaries, our guest, is that guest, but no.
No, GA.
Thank you. Sorry.
Office professionals.
Julianne Hamlin, president, and Dana Breeze, president-elect.
All right, thank you. And then do we have any PTA representatives here? Oh, yay, thank you for being here. And then our guest bud, do we have guest bud?
My name is Breezy, I'm the vice president. Stand up too. I have Jessica with me, she's over security services. Shay is our USEA representative, and then we have Damien and Garrett, who are both members of guest bud.
All right, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. Do we have any middle managers? None. Granite Education Foundation? And local elected officials? Thank you. Thank you so much. Will you stand and introduce yourself? So everybody knows who you are.
I am Christina Bias. I am one of your representatives on the Utah State Board of Education.
Thank you, Christine, for being here. We appreciate it. All right. All right, we're going to get back to...
Karen Peterson.
Oh, Karen.
Representative Peterson.
Oh, Representative Peterson. Will you stand up? Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. I have to get back to my other agenda here. All right. We're going to go ahead and have Rich Nelson, who is a secondary school leadership and improvement director, lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. So we're going to invite Rich up.
Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thanks, Rich. And we're going to turn the time over to Clark. He has a reverence for us today.
All right, thanks, Nicole. You know, in today's day and age, it feels like we hear a lot about how our young people, our students perhaps, our own children, maybe even our teachers have no desire to work anymore. I mean, it's obviously true, right? I mean, I'm in my 50th year now, so I think with a half century of experience, I can rightfully look down my nose and confirm that nobody wants to work, right? Well, I thought I better do a little testing on this hypothesis of mine. I stumbled across some research conducted on headlines and short newspaper blurbs over the roughly past 125 years. And perhaps it'll provide us a little bit of relevant commentary. From Forbes.com in 2022, it states, according to a new survey released by Tiny Pulse, 1 in 5 executive leaders agree with the statement, quote, no one wants to work. 2014 from Germantown News, what has happened in to the work ethic in America? Nobody wants to work anymore. It has not always been that way. When I first started to work as a teenager, I saw people work hard. 2006 from the Ventura County Star. I can't believe the bad luck I have had in trying to find someone to do some needed home improvements. It almost seems like nobody wants to work anymore, and when they do work, they take no pride in what they do. How does one find a dependable worker? 1999 from the St. Petersburg Times. Nobody wants to work anymore. They all want to work in front of a computer and make lots of money. 1981 from the Miami Herald, quoting a farmer. I hired 2 boys to clear the rocks off this land last week, but they just fooled around. They didn't want to work. Nobody wants to work anymore. 1952 from the Evergreen Current. I heard somebody say the other day that everybody was getting too darned lazy and nobody wants to work anymore. That's the truth if I ever heard it. 1937 from the York Daily Record. Faced with a shortage of labor when unemployment is widespread, peach orchardists in York and Adams counties are complaining that nobody wants to work anymore. There's work, it is reported, for 15 to 25 peach pickers in every orchard in the 2 counties, but only 2 to 5 pickers are at work because of the unavailability of labor. Nobody, it seems, wants to work. 1922, the Mulberry News. What is the cause of unemployment and hard times? The manufacturer and businessmen say it's because nobody wants to work anymore unless they can be paid enough wages to work half the time and loaf half the time. 1905, from the Edgefield Advertiser. Labor is scarce, high, and very unreliable. None want to work for wages. And lastly, 1894, from the Rooks County Record. With all the mines of the country shut down by strikers, what will the poor editor do for coal next winter? It is becoming apparent that nobody wants to work these hard times. So I trust you're recognizing what I did, which is that maybe as we all get a little older, we become a bit of a curmudgeon. Maybe some pessimism creeps in, and even some discouragement sneaks in further into each of our frameworks. I mean, we all know what a cynic I am, right? Or maybe some of you out there are learning for the first time tonight that I'm fairly sarcastic and cynical. But I genuinely believe that there is reason for great optimism for our students and our educators. And it's because of what I've personally observed in them, including most recently in our graduation ceremonies and other recent events. They are engaged, they are articulate, and they do want to work. So while I will never be one to try and sweep our problems and challenges under a rug, my hope this evening is that we can look back on the school year that has just concluded and look forward to the school year soon upon us with great optimism, both for and confidence in what the future holds. Helen Keller said, "Optimism is the faith that leads to achievement. Nothing can be done without hope and confidence." I hope our students, our parents, and our educators know of the great optimism and confidence that we have as a board in each of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Clark. Appreciate those comments. Before we move on to recognitions, I just want to remind anybody who is here for our budget hearing that would like to make a public comment, please feel free to step out into the hallway. There is a sign-up sheet out there that you can sign up for the public comment portion of that. Make sure that you get your name on that, and then we'll make sure that we get your public comments as we get to that budget hearing. In the meantime, we're going to turn the time over to Ben for recognitions this evening.
Thank you, Board President, Superintendent, and other board members and executive leadership team. Very excited for the tremendous amount of recognitions that we have this evening. As you are aware, under state law, our public hearing is time certain for that budget presentation. So we are going to go super, super fast. And I hope that doesn't diminish some of these incredible recognitions that we have tonight. But we have to go into our public hearing and presentation at 7:30. And then we can finish the remainder of whatever we're unable to accomplish after that and continue on with the agenda. Our first presentation tonight is our friend of public education. And we'd like to recognize Representative Karen Peterson, if she wouldn't mind joining me down here. I'm going to just say a few words and then turn the time over to the superintendent who is able to work with Representative Peterson. Representative Peterson, for those of you who don't know, is not one of our legislators, and we're very disappointed about that. But if Davis doesn't want to recognize her, we're so happy to do so. She's been a tremendous advocate for education and has worked in particular on several mental health initiatives this last legislative session, and which is why we wanted to recognize her today. And I turn the time over to the superintendent to share a few of their thoughts.
Thanks, Ben. I would just like to say to Representative Peterson, Karen, she and I have worked together for a long, long time on many different things, and I can strongly recommend you as a friend of public education. It's first and foremost on your thoughts and on your mind, and you're the first to reach out to seek feedback as you're building out bills, as you're considering new ideas, and always grateful for your partnership in advancing forward meaningful legislation. This last session, moving forward some bills, amending some bills, all in an effort to lift and support public education. Thank you so much.
Well, I appreciate this. I don't live in your district, so I was a little surprised to win this award from you. But I just want to say thank you for what you do. Being on the local school board is not for the faint of heart, and it hasn't been especially the last 4 or 5 years. So thank you for what you do. Thank you for everyone here in the audience and what you do for our students. We have an incredible education system and opportunities for our students here in our state, and we're really lucky. My own family has been had such a benefit from the good educators that are in our community. And let me know how I can continue to support you and the good work that you're doing. I'm happy to do that. So, thank you.
Thank you again to Representative Peterson for joining us tonight, allowing us to recognize her. We're going to turn the time now over to, I'm actually going to switch this up a little bit. We're going to start with Chris Shipman and the Skyline Girls Golf Team, and then we're going to go straight into our academic all-states again with Chris Shipman. And again, we're going to try to move as quickly as possible so we're not holding you up through the presentation for the budget and the time certain. So Chris Shipman, is it going to be Mr. Nerden? Okay, Mitch Nerden from principal of Skyline High School.
Hello, thank you so much for the opportunity. I want to introduce to you two gentlemen who are the coaches of the girls golf team at Skyline High School, Mr. Kenny James and Mr. Cade Robertson. Just a side note before I turn the mic over to Kenny. Kenny has, I believe it's 11 state championships in 5 different sports at Skyline High School, and he just added his 11th. So I'm going to turn the time over to Kenny.
Thank you. This was a really difficult year because of the weather, and it made this season really strange and time compressed, and the girls had to work. What the gentleman said earlier about work, our girls worked really hard. So when a lot of the teams canceled practice, we were out hitting in the covered driving range, out into the snow in the dark, and they put in extra time. And then they just kept getting better and better and better at the end of the year. And we've been working, I've been helping with girls golf since the second year it was in existence, and we've been trying to get good enough to win one of these, and we finally did. And I'm really proud of those girls, and they shot the second lowest team total ever. And our individual girl who won the individual, she shot the second lowest girls score ever. And but it was the improvement of the depth of our team and how hard they worked, and they performed well at state and peaked at the right time, and we were really grateful for the support we get from our administration and our teachers at Skyline. It was really hard because we ended up having tournaments 2 a week for a month, and they missed a lot of A days, and the teachers were really good at helping those girls, even though they had to miss for tournaments. So we couldn't have done what we did without the help of our administration and our teachers, and it was a kind of a whole team thing at Skyline, and we're really proud of what we accomplished, and couldn't do it without my principal and also my assistant coach, Cade Robertson. He's been a great support to me, so we really appreciate it, and we get everyone coming back, so hopefully we'll keep doing this.
Yeah, guys, picture. I just drew out their names. Could you please come on?
Congratulations, guys. Thank you, school board members and Granite School leadership, for taking time in tonight's meeting to recognize our academic all-state athletes. The Academic All-State Award recognizes those student athletes who have excelled in the classroom as well as athletic competition. Individuals are selected for this award on a basis of their athletic ability and their academic proficiency. Over 100,000 students participate in high school activities in the state of Utah each year. This is the most prestigious honor that the Utah High School Activities Association presents to seniors. The following students earned this honor this spring. Many of them are 2, 3, and we have one 4-time winner of this year. So yeah, we've got some great kids to be recognized. As I read your name, if you are in attendance, could you please come on down? Alex Falcone, Coleman Uti, Maxfield Russo, Colin Marchant, Kyle Rasmussen, Alema Tanner, Selvi Dance, Sarah Martinez, Jayland Hopper, Sari Johnson, Danielle Sawcroft, Aaron Jowers, Dylan Nguyen, Johnny Nguyen, Kay Hai Ong, Daniel Kwan, Yusuf Johnson, Briannon Lambert, Eric Nicholson, Garrett Cousins, Maribel Suarez, Bailey Henson, Brooklyn Henson, Lucinda Madsen, Rosie Nelson, Carly Randall, Daniela Gray, Allison Chadwick, Riley Allred, Louise Frost, Brendan Christensen, Adrian Jones, Jonathan Sampson, and Sam Soberg.
Disappointed we don't have more here, but it usually is this way in the summertime. They spread out as soon as they graduate, and so we're just pleased to recognize some of those individuals here tonight. And we do have some swag for you guys, so please take care of that with Mr. Shipman outside. And it's always appropriate, and if you don't mind, we could have some of these parents be recognized and stand. If you're a parent of an academic All-State, would you please stand and be recognized for us tonight?
Thanks for supporting your student. We know that as much as they do, that you do a lot to help them as well.
We are going to switch now to a U.S. Presidential Scholar recipient. I'm going to turn the time over to James Taylor to recognize this incredible student.
Good evening, President, Superintendent, members of the board. It's a pleasure for me to be here to present this young man. Unfortunately, I've been looking for him since I got here, and I don't see him. Aaron, if you're Aaron Wing, I think he skipped out on me, but he's probably tired. Given his resume here, he's probably tired of being recognized. This young man was here 2 months ago, being recognized as the State Sterling Scholar and the Computer Science Sterling Scholar, and it's my pleasure to have him recognized this evening as the U.S. Presidential Scholar for Career and Technical Education. This is unprecedented in the fact that this is 2 years in a row that Granite School District has had a U.S. Presidential Scholar and both from the same high school, Skyline High School. That also is unprecedented. This is one of the nation's top honors. The U.S. Presidential Scholar Program was established in 1964 by executive order of the President of the United States to recognize and honor some of our nation's most distinguished graduating high school seniors. There's only 161 of these students recognized each year in the nation, and this young man is certainly deserving. Let me just share with you again some of the accomplishments of Mr. Aaron Wang. He's about as perfect of a student academically speaking in terms of the way we score those kinds of things as you could possibly have, along with being the founder of the founder and president of the Skyline Artificial Intelligence Club, president of the Skyline Math Club, co-captain of the Utah American Regions Mathematic League. He has taken 10 AP exams, second place computer science, second place Journal of Young Investigators, best abstract, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Anyway, the list goes on and on and on. He's been a research assistant up at the University of Utah since June of 2021, working in the Artificial Intelligence Lab and the Neural Robotics Lab. This young man is amazing. As I look over his information, just incredible. I don't know when he finds time to sleep, but we're very proud of him and pleased to present him to you tonight for your recognition. Mr. Aaron Wang from Skyline High School.
I just got a text message from Aaron. He's taking another AP exam and could not join us tonight. So we will find another opportunity to recognize him, and thank you, James, for recognizing, again, only 161 out of the entire United States. So we're going to try and squeeze in one more recognition. I'm going to turn the time over to Rebecca Ibarra and Principal Michael Douglas to present our Mesa Utah Engineering Design Competition winners.
Thank you very much. Nice to see you this evening, Board President and Clark. I really appreciate your reference today. The UEDC, these students are here tonight. They won the Utah Engineering Design Competition, and they are now moving on to the National Engineering Design Competition, which is the NEDC, which will be held in Albuquerque, New Mexico, June 26th through the 29th. That is this coming up shortly here, and we're all getting really excited about that. The Design for Equity is the National Engineering Design Competition. Asks students to first identify an individual or a group who experiences some type of inequality. Then, using a microprocessor as the key component of the design, teams will employ human-centered design practices to engineer a solution. Teams must use at least one of the following microprocessors as the main component of their design: Arduino, Circuit Playground Express, and/or Microbit. Tonight we have our winners from the middle school level, which is Churchill Junior High School. If they're here, please come up. That would be under the direction of Mr. Derek Tate, Nina Mankowski, Marco Del Canto, Hayes Roller, and Andrew Larson. If they're here, they helped to design a nice product called the Helping Hat, and we're going to wish them well in the NEDC competition at the end of June. Then our Cottonwood High School, and that's also under the principal, is Trent. Hendricks, I would like to win. Trent, I just know he's Trent. Hendricks, who's not able to be with us tonight. The high school is going to be from Cottonwood High School, and that brings us with our principal, Mr. Mike Douglas, our advisor, Yuri Perez, and our students here are Jessica Pereira da Fonseca, Noor Al-Sabsabe, and Diana Trifanankova, and Siona Cook. These young women, I love this, they're Mesa, which are underprivileged, underrepresented, and definitely minority here in the fact that we have so many girls joining this year. Jessica's from Brazil, Jessica. Noor is from Syria, and Diana's from Russia, and Siona's all the way here from California. So I just want you to see the diversity here that we have representing Mesa this year, and we'll be representing Granite School District with the National Engineering Design Competition this June. I'm excited to be going to Albuquerque with this young team. Chris and his wife Julie are here this evening, if you'll just raise your hand. They are the mentors to Cottonwood High School's team, and I appreciate everybody for participating in the MESA program. MESA and STEM, of course, are the heart of education. Mike, did you want to say something? Thank you.
Always take an opportunity to thank Yuri Perez. He's our advisor, and the support of Chris, our mentor. We could not have the success without Mr. Perez, so congratulations, students.
Thank you. And I will say that the junior high, this is the first year that the middle school is actually competing, so it's really good to see the junior high kids. Ben, will you pass that to the board members just to pass around? It's this. They're going to give you a copy of the presentations that the kids presented and their inventions that they created. Thank you.
And could we have those parents, the parents of these wonderful students also? Parents, will you stand and be recognized as well? Thank you. And parents. All right, thank you. And Ben, go ahead and do the last recognition.
Say that again, sir.
Go ahead and do the last recognition.
Okay, we're going to turn the time over to Noel Converse to recognize a handful of teachers really quick with some incredible recognitions.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Board President, board members, and all of our guests here tonight. I have a couple of very special awards to give. They're also very heavy, so I'm having Chris bring them up so that I don't drop them on someone's toe. The first is Rob Mon. If you could come up, Rob. Rob has been teaching for 20 years. He taught in Yuma, Arizona, and at Green River High School in Green River, Utah, before moving to Granite School District. Most recently, come on over, he has taught for the last 9 years at Cottonwood High. While at Cottonwood, he teaches French, driver's ed, PE, health, and credit recovery. He also helped coach boys basketball, girls basketball, boys tennis, softball, and baseball. He maintains the main website, as well as the activities website for Cottonwood High, and he has helped with Granite Online, Stephanie Wood, who's in the Curriculum and Instruction Department, and Matt Bauman, developed the current online driver's ed course that's being used. Another little tidbit is he will be actually taking Matt Bauman's place as our new driver's ed specialist. So we want to honor him tonight because he also won the UDT SEA Outstanding Teacher Award, which is the Utah Drivers Training Safety Education Association. Wow, I got it. And he is the outstanding teacher for 22-23. So thank you and congratulations, and be careful. You want me to? Okay, and now I'm going to have Matt Bauman come up. Matt Bauman has worked for Granite School District for 30 years. He has served the students, parents, and community as a driver's ed teacher, a math teacher, a basketball and baseball coach, an athletic director, and his current position as the driver's education specialist. Come over here. He also has served on the UDT SEA board for 6 years in various capacities as member, vice president, and president. He has dedicated his life, his vast knowledge, experience, and passion for the overall success of coaches, students, teachers, and our driver's education program, which is really important because we need good drivers. His many accomplishments include developing a driver's education program for our alternative schools in the district, including Roosevelt Continuation School, YES, and Connection High. He has enabled disadvantaged and struggling students to acquire essential life skills by completing driver's education. And we've had over 30 in the last few years get their driver's license from those programs. So we're really, really proud of this. And it's a special spot for him. He has assisted the state in developing the online driver's education course. He's worked with the State Law and Policy Committee. He has helped with new policies and developed course curriculum to improve student access and success in driver's education. He's just a tremendous support, and he's a fierce advocate of pedestrian safety and overall well-being of our driving environment. So he's kind of caught me in the parking lot a couple times and has very gently redirected my driving habits.
And her parking.
Matt has made significant program improvements, such as the scheduler, introducing the education process early on with 7th and 8th grade students and their parents, implementing street smarts, aiding the faculty in transitioning to PBL, which was a little bit of a challenge for our driver's ed teachers, but they really have come along quite well. He has been privileged to work for one of the finest, most highly acclaimed driver's education programs in the United States. These are his own words. A district-sustained program with awesome teachers, administrators, and highly skilled and capable staff. And because of this and because of your support, this is why we have a high-quality program, and Matt feels that this is why he has gotten this award. Just a little bit about him: loves basketball, dry fly fishing, photography, family history, and spending time with his best friend and wife of 32 years, Jenny. We're going to miss Matt dearly because he is now, in addition to getting the Driver's Education Award for the Utah Driver Traffic Safety Education Association, he's also leaving us this year. So we are going to miss him dearly, and I don't know if you want to say just a word.
Thank you.
So, great job. And just real quick, finally, I want to just bring Chris Shipman back up because sadly, our PE and athletics specialist in Granite School District has taken an assistant directorship with the Utah High School Athletics Association, which is a great relationship for us in Granite to have someone who serves in that capacity, but we will miss him dearly. So just saying goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris, for all that you've done for our district as well. We appreciate it. We do too.
Yeah, we've needed someone.
Appreciate it. All right, we would like to, I will entertain a motion to recess from the general session for the purpose of beginning the public hearing on the budget. Somebody does. Should I pass it to Connie?
I said it's on you. What?
So we need a motion to recess from general session.
We need to recess the general session for purposes of beginning the public hearing on the budget.
Would you like to make that a motion?
Yes, it's a motion.
Okay. Thank you, that's a motion.
I'll second her motion.
Thank you. So we have a motion and a second for recessing the general session for the purpose of beginning the public hearing on the budget. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, I convene the public hearing on the Granite School District budget. I'm going to turn the time over to Todd. Are you helping, or are we just turning it over to Brian? All right. One more quick reminder, if you are here and would like to comment on the budget, this portion of the budget hearing that we have, there are sign-up sheets out in the lobby. Please feel free to jump out there and put your name on there if you would like to.
All right, well, thank you. Appreciate the time to do an overview of the budget. Hopefully you have a hard copy there on your desk, and we've also had it posted out on the website for your perusal. We're going to jump into the 23-24 budget, as well as any questions that you have on the 22-23 final budget. We can manage those as well. I'm going to turn the time over to our excellent budget director, Brian Ibsen. Let him run with that, and then we'll do some tag team along the way with our presentation.
There we go. Okay. Thank you, board members, for this opportunity to be here and present the budget. So before we jump into the presentation, I have to share a quick story. My daughter is 10 years old. She just finished 4th grade, and she loves to make presentations, PowerPoint presentations. It's her thing. And she asked me if she could look at one of mine and give me suggestions on improvements that I could potentially make to my PowerPoint. And I was like, okay. So I showed her this presentation, actually, and she looked at it and came back to me and said, okay, a couple of things. And her list was mostly 2 things. Your fonts are really boring, and you need more color in your slides. I don't think she understands what budget presentations are all about. So anyways, maybe next year we'll have some color and some fancy fonts, but this year we have the boring Brian Ibsen fonts. So with that, we'll jump into the presentation. So just jumping right in, the process that we go through every single year as we put together the budget is kind of a continual thing. Like, we're finishing up one year while at the same time beginning a new year, and that is a continuous cycle that doesn't seem to ever end, right? And so the process that we go through in the springtime, specifically as we're thinking about next year's budget, focuses on revenues and then on expenditures. And as far as revenues go, we're looking to estimate the monies that we'll have available to us in the district. So this includes federal funds like our title programs, like our ESSER COVID relief funding, special ed funding, CTE funding. This coming year, we'll have something we've never had before, which is FEMA funds to help replace one of our school buildings. So that's a new thing. We have state funds. The big one is through our WPU funding with the basic school program. We have funds that are specifically for schools to use through the Land Trust program. We have adult ed, the teacher and student success program that again gives funds directly to schools for them to use for needs in their local community. And then a big one this year especially was the educator salary adjustment, which allows us to give compensation increases to our teachers specifically. Local funds, the major source there being property taxes. And then we have interest earnings, local grants, and donations. And so in all of those cases, we are putting together our best projections of where those revenues are going to land, what funding will be available. And then as we have those numbers after the legislative session ends, we begin to estimate our expenditures. And recently, we've had plenty of cost increases that have come about as a result of just inflationary pressures. So the cost of doing business has increased for our district. We have budget requests from schools or district departments or the superintendency or whoever it may be in the district that is requesting consideration of their budget requests for the coming year. And then we always have the salary and benefit cost increases, by far the biggest item in the budget, as we fund steps and lanes for teachers and others on salary schedules, as we potentially talk about cost of living increases and related things like that. So on both of those fronts, we're attempting to estimate and put numbers to, okay, what are things, what funding do we have available and what are things going to cost us?
Brian, can I just insert really quick? Because this came up last year with our Truth and Taxation hearing. We don't have, I just want to be really clear, even though it is part of our state budget, we don't have control over land trust or the TSSA, which is the Teacher Student Success Act money, correct? That is not, that is something that's decided by, the board doesn't decide that, right?
So the allocations, the amount that we receive as a district is determined by the state, and those allocations are given to us by the state.
But
yes.
we, as a board, don't allocate those funds. That is the TSSA money as well as the land trust. The bulk of that goes to schools, and the community councils are the ones that allocate that.
Correct. So the local community councils, and those allocations are made strictly on the basis of enrollment numbers and average daily membership numbers. And so depending on how much each school has, that determines their allocation of our big district allocation. But correct, the community councils are the ones that help to give input on how those funds will be spent and those plans.
Thanks.
Yep. In the governmental world, we do everything using funds. And so there are specific funds that are set up within the district to track different revenue sources. And each fund that we use in our accounting records is balanced. That means as we put a budget together, we only plan to spend what we have. We don't plan to spend more than we have. And we typically are putting together a budget that allocates and spends out the resources that we have on the students that we're going to be educating in that year, right? And so there are fund balances and there are sometimes leftovers, but for the most part, we are budgeting to spend the dollars that we receive and provide services and education to the students in our district. Throughout the year, budgets can be amended by action of the board. However, typically, we will adopt a budget in June in this budget hearing, and then there are smaller adjustments that can be made to working budgets throughout the year, and a final budget that will be adopted at the end of the year that incorporates some of those smaller adjustments that have been made throughout the year. And so that again tonight is what we'll be doing, not only adopting a budget for next year, but approving the final budget for 22-23 based on the things that have changed, or knowing more at the end of the year allows us to make some adjustments to those budgets. This book, we produce one every year, and this is the budget source, right? This tells you for every fund what our planned revenues are, what our expenditures are. It shows a history of the last 3 fiscal years that have been completed. It shows that final budget for this current school year we're in and the proposed budget for next year. So you can see that by fund, and anyone can go out to the web and view this budget book. It has a budget again for every single fund for which the board has legal responsibility. So that includes the general fund, it includes student activity funds, pass-through tax fund, which is for redevelopment and charter school, the charter school levy, the fund for our Granite Education Foundation, capital funds, debt service for payment of our bonds, and then school lunch for breakfast and lunch in our schools. So each one of those funds has its own budget and proposed revenues and expenditures for the year. Where is the budget published? In addition to the printed copies, you can go to graniteschools.org, and there is a link, a bulletin on the front page that will take you to this budget document. You can also go to the best web page on graniteschools.org, which is the budget department webpage, and the budget can be found there as well.
How are the fonts?
They're boring, yes. Okay, key budget dates. March 3rd was the last date of the legislative general session. Following that, it's kind of a whirlwind of getting numbers together, projecting, figuring out what our state revenues will be, and then beginning to estimate other revenues and receiving, again, budget requests from departments and people in the district. By May 30th, we had the proposed budget posted online in accordance with law, giving 15 days of viewing time for anyone in the public that wanted to see the proposed budget. It was online and available printed here at the district for anyone to review. On May 31st, we published advertisements in the Salt Lake Tribune and Deseret News about this budget hearing that would be held tonight. And then by June 30th, we are required as a district to hold a budget hearing and adopt a budget for the coming year in order to begin spending funds next year. So again, to review, action to be taken on 3 items tonight. will include approval of last year, or the 22-23 budget, adopting the 23-24 budget, and setting tentative property tax rates for that year. And then we'll get into this and talk about it in a little bit, but authorizing a truth and taxation hearing to be held in August as well. Yes.
What he's described here very briefly are the bare minimum requirements for public transparency. I would also point out that we developed a budget mailer that was sent out to active and registered voters with direct links to our budget that's above and beyond the state requirements, and has been a tradition here of transparency in Granite School District.
Great point. Thanks, Ben. That truth and taxation hearing, the time and date will be coordinated with the Salt Lake County Auditor's Office. We do have August 1st tentatively scheduled as the board meeting in August that we will hold that truth and taxation hearing. Okay, the legislative session, what happened in January through March up on the Hill? The big number that everyone always looks at is the WPU increase. So the weighted pupil unit increased by 6% in fiscal year 24. That is by itself, just with regular K through 12 WPU funding, a $13.5 million increase to Granite School District. Another big thing that happened is that full-day kindergarten was funded completely, meaning any student now in our district who chooses to participate in full-day kindergarten, they will be funded as a full-day student, so at 1 WPU, just like any other student would be. It used to be 0.55 for those students, and then they had some grant programs that helped us to offset costs of providing the full-day kindergarten that we provided, but now it's just across the board. Any student who's enrolled full-time will generate a full WPU. So assuming that most of our students next year will be full-day, most of our kindergarten students, that will be approximate $1.4 million increase in funding over prior year. The educator salary adjustment in HB 215, this is the adjustment that gave teachers several years back a $4,200 bump in their salaries. And for fiscal year 24, for next school year, that has been increased from the $4,200 up to $8,400. So every teacher that's a full-time teacher will receive an additional $4,200 in salary plus benefits next year. Educator professional hours is again funded on a one-time basis. This allows teachers to submit a plan to their supervisor of professional development kinds of things they want to engage in during the school year and receive a stipend as they complete that plan and submit that back to their principal or their supervisor. That's approximately $5.9 million to Granite. And then this last one was kind of a controversial topic throughout the session, the income tax earmark for public education. So this is the earmark that says that income tax dollars are earmarked specifically for public ed and cannot go anywhere else. There was a bill that was passed to remove that earmark, and kind of as a compensation or a way to offset that for public education, there's a 5-year hold harmless where if funding were to, or I mean, if enrollment were to decline during that period, the legislature would essentially keep funding constant during that.
And that hold harmless period begins fiscal year July 1?
26, right?
26,
Yeah.
Okay. So it won't affect this year's budget?
Yeah, this doesn't have any impact on this year's budget. It's more
Okay.
for future reference and knowing.
Yes. So these provisions are conditioned on passage of the constitutional amendment.
Yep. November 2024 is when that will be on the ballot. Okay, just quickly, what is the weighted pupil unit? It is the foundation of funding in the state of Utah as far as public ed funding goes. All LEAs, local education agencies, are funded through the WPU. And the main way that funding flows to LEAs is through the primary pupil count program. So basically, as a student is enrolled in a school and attends, they generate what's called average daily membership. And in kindergarten, grades 1 through 12, in the special ed self-contained world, those ADM numbers then turn into WPUs, which turn into funding for a school district. There are also other add-on programs where above and beyond the one WPU that a student generates, they could potentially generate additional WPUs if they are a special ed student or if they're a CTE student or if they have certain at-risk factors. So that would be things like ELL students or students that are socioeconomically disadvantaged. Those students would qualify for additional funding or additional WPUs that would flow through to Granite. The class size reduction funding was given many years ago and reduced class sizes when it was given, and then since then has kind of been all about maintaining those class sizes that were reduced. So what has happened with the WPU over the years? You can see that it's been throughout the period from 09 to 2021, it's kind of been very much up and down. We had a couple of years during the recessionary period where there was no WPU increase. You had fiscal year 12 where it looks like there's a big increase, but they actually rolled some other funding into the WPU that didn't, so that 9.3 is kind of deceptive there. And then from there, we go anywhere from a 1% up to a 4%. Fiscal year 21 actually started out as a 6% increase and then was reduced to 1.8% after the COVID pandemic started. So they had a special session and reduced that. But then for the last 3 fiscal years, including this coming fiscal year, we have seen 6% WPU increases, which has been great. Grateful for that, and it definitely helps in this world of increasing costs and the challenges that we're facing. You know, it's great, and at the same time, you always say, man, I wish we had more, right? But we are grateful for that sustained level of 6% increases over the last 3 years. Looking at our budget overall, all funds, you can see the general fund is $712 million of the total of just over $1 billion in total budget between all of our funds in the district. Capital outlay has been large over the last several years as we have rebuilt our schools, as we've done the Skyline and Cypress projects, as we've done Westlake, other projects prior to that. So $190.4 million in the capital outlay fund. School lunch at $42.5 million, debt service $33.9 million, and then the school funds of $16.6. So the general fund is where the bulk of our budget sits. So having said that, let's talk about the general fund and where the revenues inside of the general fund come from. The projected revenues for fiscal year 24 are about $715 million. Of that, a little over 30% are state unrestricted funds. So these are funds that come to us from the state that don't have any specific earmark on them to say it has to be spent on this specific thing. So that includes that K-12 WPU funding. It also includes guarantees that the state gives us on certain property taxes we levy. And then we have our restricted funds from the state that are program specific. They have to be spent on the purpose that the state has given those to us for. So those include adult ed, at-risk, add-on, CTE funding, special ed, the Teacher and Student Success Act, educator salary adjustment. All of those are part of that 28% state restricted funding. As far as property taxes go, we have a number of different levies that end up in the general fund and fund general operations of the district. Those are approximately 28%. And then federal funding of about 11%. A really big part of that in fiscal year 24 is the ESSER funding. This is the final year of the COVID relief funding that will be going away after fiscal year 24. So that percentage will definitely drop as we look forward to fiscal year 25.
Hey, Brian, real quick, is the FEMA funding factored into this or no?
Nope, it's not, because this is general fund, so that would be in the capital fund.
That'll be in capital?
Yeah.
Okay, I wasn't sure which one it would go into.
Okay, now we're going to look at things from the expenditure side. What do we budget to spend our money on in the general fund? And as you can see, almost 88% is salary and benefits. That's what we do in the general fund is pay for people. And teachers and support staff and all of our great employees that help to provide quality education for our students. That's the bulk of what we're doing in the general fund. Supplies of 6.5%. Utilities have actually increased a little bit this year, and we'll get into that, of about 3%. And then other services and objects, 2.4%. So now we're going to go through the ongoing budget of the general fund, but we're kind of looking at it on a new revenues basis. So the new funds that we have available to us next year and the requests and new expenditures that we have to consider as far as the budget goes. And so this is not all of our revenues by any stretch of the imagination. This is just showing you the new funding sources that are available and the budget priorities that have been put in place with those new revenues. So that state funding, including the WPU increase, gives us approximately $15.8 million in new funds. State property tax guarantees of approximately $7.1 million. We have property tax new growth, which is different than any property tax increase. This is funding that, as a result of new businesses coming online in the district, new homes in the district, that there's new parcels that are generating property tax revenues. So we estimate about $1.5 million from the new growth. The BTS arts funding is something that will be increasing next year as a result of a review we did with the USBE on our BTS program, that we're actually going to get additional funding next year that will reduce the amount that we have to contribute into the program to fund it. And so the state's giving us $1.2 million more than we've received in the past for the BTS program, which is great. The TSSA program allows for us to use 25% of the funds to fund teacher increases as far as salaries go. So that $599,000 represents money that can be used for that purpose. And then we had various base budget reductions that we made of approximately $900,000 that were just things here or there where we were able to cut out of the base budget and reduce that, freeing up some funds there. So in total, we've got about $27.2 million in new funds to work with. Now we'll get into the obligations and the expenditure side of that equation. Oh, one more item that actually will generate some funding or generate some cost savings next year will be the closure of 3 of our elementary schools. So Mill Creek, Spring Lane, and Twin Peaks will be closing this coming year, and there are certain operational costs that we will save as a result of those schools being closed, including staff costs like secretary, custodial, office help, reading specialist, technology coach. There are a number of these kinds of positions that are one position per school, and so that doesn't mean that anyone will be losing their job or that their position will be going away. It's more of natural attrition in those positions, and people retiring will be able to transfer those people to other schools or have them move elsewhere. There are some of these savings that will be reduced by us retaining the administrative staff positions to allow for more assistant principal positions in our elementary schools, and then custodial staff to help provide coverage in the closed schools and continue to maintain those buildings until something happens with them in the future. So the total savings there were estimated at just north of $1 million. And so we're factoring that into the ongoing budget conversation as well. Now we'll get into the expenditure side. There are certain contractual considerations that come up every year as we talk about employee costs. So just the natural progression of employees on our salary schedules produces a cost for step increases. And it's sometimes just assumed that this will be funded, but it's important to know how much of a commitment that is on the district side to provide those built-in step increases to our employees. So that's approximately $6.2 million just on the unrestricted fund side next year. So it's quite a commitment, and it's really nice benefit for our employees to have those step increases as they progress in their careers. We will have employees that will retire and move on and do different things, and so There are always turnover savings that result from employees that are higher on the salary schedule leaving and a new employee starting that's at the beginning of the salary schedule. That's estimated at 1.5 million. And then this coming year, we do have a 7% increase in health insurance premiums that I think everyone's dealing with this same reality of healthcare costs being higher. And in addition to the 7% increase on the district side, the district is picking up the tab on the increase on the employee side. So there will be no increase to employees on their premiums, and the district's going to cover that piece as well. So that's part of that 3.1 million. Our CTE program, every year when we get state funding, they provide us with a number that's called our maintenance of effort number. We have to contribute district funds into the program at that amount, and that increased this year by $656,000. And so our costs to the CTE program will be going up by, or our commitment as a district will be going up by that amount, and that's the unrestricted district funds that will be contributed into the CTE program. Next, we have the laundry list of other things that are potentially changing in the budget for 23-24. The two big ones are the ones at the top. The first would be curriculum software adoptions. That this is a repeat of something you would have heard last year, if you remember the budget hearing from last year, that we were able to take care of a portion of this last year and solve the rest of the problem with one-time funding, and this 1.9 million allows for us to cover future costs of our textbook and curriculum adoptions. We have a big fun spreadsheet that estimates all of these adoptions into the future and builds in inflation and how much are we going to need every single year in order to fund these adoptions, because they're typically done on a 5 or 6 year schedule that we prepay for those as we purchase them. And so you've got to have money in the piggy bank every single time one of those comes up to be able to pay those costs. And this is allowing us to get to a place where we feel like we're fully funded. And so that will be great to have that built in and those costs fully funded into the future. Utilities, it's one that we never want to have as part of our budget, right? You don't want to spend your money on utilities, but unfortunately it is a reality of this year and moving into next year that those costs, especially for natural gas, have increased significantly. And the 4.1 million represents our best guess as to where these will land next year. And it's a huge increased commitment of resources, and we recognize that. But I think we're doing our best as far as trying to make sure that we're being efficient and doing the things we need to so that we can keep those costs down. But there is a certain part of it that just is a reality of the situation. Other inflationary cost increases include stuff from like our transportation department and our maintenance group, that costs of repairs or hiring people to do those kinds of things have increased. I know that parts for our school buses have gone through the roof, and we have fuel that's increased over the last couple of years, significant increases for fuel. And so that $840,000 is a recognition of those kinds of pressures in the budget. We have contracted school resource officers, mostly through the Unified Police Department. This will be the final year of that agreement with Unified, because there will be some changes following this coming fiscal year with Unified, and so we'll have to see where things go from there. But this coming year, there were built-in increases into our contract with Unified that it will cost us $115,000 more next year for that contract. There were a couple of FTE additions that were added into the budget. One or two new FTE for the BTS Arts program. Additional teachers that will allow for us to have some of our larger elementary schools as we have students moving to elementary schools as a result of the closures. We'll have full-time teachers there, a teacher there all day instead of part of the day, or allow for more coverage in our bigger elementary schools that have more students. There's a new FTE in policy and legal, and then our GAP program, it's the Roosevelt Continuation School, one additional teacher there. So $401,000 total on those FTE additions. And then the other line here includes items such as coaches at our high schools. There are some new sports that have been sanctioned and new coaches that will be required to be paid for as a result of those new sports that we're sponsoring. There are software adoptions and then things like covering volunteer fingerprinting costs. Just random miscellaneous things are all part of that other item in there.
Board President, should I be holding my questions for the end? Or
Would you please, unless it's some clarification on this particular thing?
Well, it is a little bit. Curriculum software adoptions cost increases. So when we talked about that and how it used to be that we had textbooks, we had this textbook budget, and now this is an increased cost from what the old budget was. You said then that now we've kind of got this under control, and we've got a plan for how to move forward with this increased ongoing cost. Have I got that right?
Correct,
Okay.
yeah.
I just want to make sure my expectation was right. I didn't want you to come next year and me be like, well, wait a minute.
You said, right?
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Now, to clarify, that's as of right now, and there's always uncertainty with the future, but as far as we know of right now, and building some reasonable inflationary cost increases into that model, we feel like we're at a good place with this 1.9 million. Yes.
I'll put a pretty picture on next year.
Okay, the final thing we'll talk about as far as next year's expenditures is the recruitment and retention of employees. So as we've gone through the negotiations process as a district and talked through different employee groups, there are two agreements that are, one is finalized and then another will be finalized as of tonight. So with the GEA for our teachers, there will be a 2.5% COLA or cost of living increase. And that's in addition to that $4,200 that they will receive from HB 215. So a pretty good increase for our teachers and a recognition of their service to the district. As far as GESPA goes for our education support professionals, there is a monumental increase that has been tentatively agreed upon, which is a $4 per hour increase for those education support professionals. Agreed, yeah. This is something that I think will make a huge difference in our district moving forward, and just being able to attract and retain and bring good employees into our district. And you know, it's something you hear from many teachers that I just want good para-educators, or I want good people in my classroom to help. I want, you know, that's a common thing that you hear from teachers, and I think that this will allow us to move forward in that regard. And so it's really a monumental step that we're taking as far as this budget for 24 goes. So as we look at the total costs of the comp package, there are a couple other pieces of this that are not quite finalized as far as employee groups go, but we can look at this on a total ongoing budget cost basis. The total comp package is estimated at approximately $22.1 million to fund all of the different increases that have been proposed and talked about between our different employee groups. And if we take that and plug it in to see where we're at as far as new funding that we have available, all of the savings from school closures, and then the various costs that we've talked about, you'll see that we end up at a place where we're about $10.2 million short of balancing the budget on an ongoing basis. And so that's where the next part of this conversation comes in, that the budget is proposing a fairly modest tax increase in order to allow for this to happen, but recognizing that anytime you're asking for additional property tax revenues from the public, there's there's a heavy lift on their end to help support this and help, provide for the things that we're proposing in the budget. And so that total increase that would be generated through the proposed property tax increase is $10.2 million, which works out to be about $61 on an average valued home in the district. Keep in mind that that's an average valued home, and everyone's circumstance is a little bit different. And so it's always important to look at your specific numbers and not just run with the numbers that are presented here. But as we look at that, we, as I said, have made every effort to try to ensure the lowest property tax rates we can, the lowest burden to our taxpayers, to generate sufficient revenues to finance the things we've talked about tonight. We have not had a property tax increase for operations since 2018 when adjustments were made to the teacher salary schedule. And so it has been a number of years since anything like this has been proposed. Again, this will require a truth in taxation hearing to be held on August 1st to discuss this and allow the public to have input on the decision to do that. And so when we plug that number in, that is what is balancing our budget and bringing us to a zero there with the funds from that property tax increase. So having said that, I'll turn the time over to Todd for a few minutes to talk about prioritization of our resources that we received this year.
Great. So we're in the process of going through a strategic plan that has priorities and different actionable items within that strategic plan. This budget takes those increases and aligns it with the strategic plan. So the three main focus areas of the strategic plan are identified. As we went through the budget request process, we had each of the groups actually identify which of the strategic priorities they feel their budget fit under. We captured it that way, and then we also asked them to provide us the performance measures that they would be using for those additional dollars. So we're at the very outset of going through the strategic plan alignment and focusing at this point just on the new dollars that are coming in. As we move forward, we'll begin going into the base budgets and then aligning the base budgets also with the strategic plan priorities as well. At this point, this graph here just shows out of the new dollars that we're focusing, this is how it's falling out within the strategic plan. Most of it falling into the academic priority. I don't know, Superintendent, if you wanted to add to that or.
Just to embarrass you a little bit, Todd, part of selecting a new business administrator, one of our priorities of the board was to hire a strategic CFO. And Todd definitely is that, Brian is that, brings that element to that as well, is to say, hey, what are our priorities? And really, whether you're a district, a school, or any organization really, you can determine what your priorities if you follow the dollar to see how we spend our money. And so this is, right out of the gates, looking at this budget a little bit differently this year is to make sure that they are aligned to priority. Thank you.
All right, let's go ahead and move forward talking about capital outlay and debt service. So as a reminder of our long-term capital funding strategy that we've talked about a couple of times throughout budget hearings and tax hearings and things over the years. We had three different options in 2017 when we were proposing different things in order to solve our problem of aging school buildings and the needs of our capital fleet in the district. One was to do a single tax increase that would immediately raise capital funding levels, so to increase and bring funds directly into the capital fund. Another option would have been to have a series of bonds that every 4 to 5 years we go back and have another election that would allow us to issue bonds and rebuild some schools with the funds that we receive from those bonds. Ultimately, what we settled on in 2017 was kind of a mix of those two models where we put a vote out to the public in 2017. They voted yes on issuing bonds for certain projects. And then as we have bonds that are coming off the books, as we're paying things off, we are moving that revenue over to our capital fund to begin trying to do things on a pay-as-you-go basis. And so that was ultimately what was selected. We issued bonds starting in 2019 through 2021, and we've actually now used all of the proceeds that we received from those bond issuances to do the various projects that were authorized under the bonds. And we now have some of that revenue that's been shifted into capital, and the plan is to continue that forward, that we will have ongoing money that can do these things and pay for these things on a pay-as-you-go basis. However, having said that, this coming year, we actually had in our bond payment schedule an increase built in. So instead of bond payments going down in fiscal year 24, they are increasing slightly, and then from there we'll taper off. And so this was always a part of the planned rollout of the bonds and paying off the bonds, that this coming year would be a year where it would increase slightly. And so there will be no shift that will happen in fiscal year 24, because we're actually going the other way, right? So just to illustrate that, here is our debt service schedule. You can see that in this fiscal year, we had debt service of about $30.6 million. In 24, we're going to have $33.9 million, and then slowly beginning to taper off from there. And you can see as we get to really fiscal year 30 and beyond is where we really have a decrease in that debt service that will allow for additional revenues to be shifted over to capital to fund projects on an ongoing basis. Just as a reminder of some of the projects that have been financed through these bonds, we have Driggs Elementary, Evergreen Junior High, Hunter High School, that are all additions or remodels to the school. Oline Walker and South Kearns Elementary were actually rebuilds entirely, and then Rosecrest and Valley Junior High were also remodels. And we all know the current projects in progress, Skyline and Cypress High, that have planned completion dates between fiscal year 26 to 27. So as I mentioned, the construction costs for those projects now will shift to being paid out of capital as opposed to paid with bond proceed monies. Since we have fully spent that money out, we'll now shift over and start using the capital fund to pay for these costs. So capital outlay fund next year, we have revenues of about $72 million in property taxes. Interest has increased significantly recently, which is a great development. We're getting close to 5% on our money that we're holding on to, which was well under 1% just a few short years ago. So that's budgeted at $5.6 million. We have a small amount of state funding that's mostly funds for filters and things along Mountain View corridor schools that we receive from the state, so HVAC systems and filters. Then we have a big chunk of our ESSER funding that is planned for HVAC projects at our schools that should all be completed this fiscal year, because that's the last year we have the ESSER funding. And then here is where our federal FEMA money is budgeted, approximately $17.8 million of money that's allocated or been granted to us to help cover the costs of the Westlake rebuild. And we'll make it so that we don't have to do any bonding for that school, which will be great. Expenditures, we have equipment allocations for both schools, so the bigger chunk of that is for the schools. They receive capital discretionary allocations that can be used for smaller equipment items or smaller projects at their schools, capital projects. About $1.4 million. Our maintenance department gets $2.4 million. Police and their equipment is approximately $420,000. Our property management people have a budget of about $1.6 million. A big chunk of that is for land acquisitions, and it's just built in, but a lot of times it doesn't end up being used. We have school projects, so these are the smaller school construction projects, like smaller remodels or classroom kinds of things. We have some of those schools that are absorbing the students from the closed schools that will have some of those smaller remodels done in their classrooms. That's $16.2 million. And then the big number, the $121.5 million, is related to our school rebuilds. So that includes all three of those projects and the various revenue sources that will be funding those, whether it be the FEMA money for Westlake or the regular ongoing capital money for the other two. Support services, $572,000. Transportation of $1.6 million is totally buses purchased for the transportation department. And then our technology capital items and software is 3.9 million. So if you look at this, you'll notice that if you add up the expenditures, it's actually a little bit more than what the revenues are, and that's because we have a fairly large fund balance that we'll be carrying over from 23 to 24 that will fund some of these projects. So it's the whole model of that pay-as-you-go thing that we're accumulating resources and then using them as we pay out these construction projects that we've undertaken. Debt service, we have budgeted property taxes of about 35 million and 200,000 in interest. And then it's pretty simple here. We've got bond principal payments of 23.8, interest payments of 10.1, a few miscellaneous costs, and then the statute does allow for us, if we have excess funds in the debt service fund, to fund technology programs in the district. And so that's built in. That's not a sure thing. That transfer only happens if there is excess money available in the debt service fund at the end of the year. Our property tax rates, just as a general reminder, certified tax rates, as valuations in our district go up, the general rule is that each year, the certified tax rate that's set by the State Tax Commission will go down in order to offset that effect overall, right? So the decreased rate is known as the certified tax rate. And the exact opposite would be true if property valuations in our district were to go down, then the certified rate would go up. And the concept being that we are revenue neutral from year to year, that we will bring in the same revenue next year that we were able to bring in this year through property taxes, with the exception of new growth. So again, those new pieces of property in our district that are generating property taxes would be new revenues that we would generate. When you talk about this, it's important to remember that everyone's tax situation is a little bit different, and depending on whether someone's home went up in value as compared to other homes in the district, theirs might not follow this model exactly. And so it really depends on a specific property owner, how much theirs increased or changed in comparison to everyone else's in the district. Looking at our rates for next year, the state basic school rate is the levy that as a district we are required to levy in order to participate in the basic school program and receive revenues from the state. So we levy this tax, and that money together with the funds contributed by the state fund the basic school program and those WPUs that we talked about earlier. There is going to be a significant adjustment this year in the state basic school levy. These rates are not final yet because we are still waiting on the tax commission and the Salt Lake County auditor to give us our for sure certified rates. But we do know there will be a significant decrease there because there has been legislative language over the last 5 years that froze that rate and kept it at the same rate it was every year when property values were increasing. That rate stayed steady, and now that's gone away, and so there's an adjustment that's happening to that rate that's going to bring it down quite a bit. The charter school levy is another one that as a district we are required to levy, but we don't actually see any of that revenue. So that goes to fund charter schools in the area or in the state. And this year we actually have seen a significant increase in that rate, or what we're projecting that rate to be, as a result of our property tax shift that happened from debt service to capital. So as they calculate this charter school levy, the way that they do it is they take all of our revenues that we generate from the board local, voted local, and capital local levies and pool them together and say, okay, how much on a per student basis are you generating for those charter school kids? And because now we've shifted from debt service, a rate that wasn't included in that calculation, to capital, a rate that is included, that's what's caused that drastic increase in our charter school levy, from the 0.00089 up to the 0.00132. Do you have something? Yeah. Yeah. Yep. So as we look at the board levy in connection with that charter school levy, it's important to note that those two are kind of connected at the hip to each other. So as that charter school levy increases, what that means is that our certified rate for the board local levy is going to decrease. So as this goes from the 89 up to the 132, that means that that difference there is going to be deducted from our board local levy, meaning we're going to lose those revenues that are now generated through the charter school levy. And so what this means is that without us really doing anything, we've lost some funds that we would have had before on that board local levy. So we received the certified rates or projected certified rates on Monday, and that's where this all came to light. So it's important to note that we're working with estimates as we try to put the budget together, and as we try to plan for the coming year, we're working with estimates, and these things change. And until a week or two from now, we're not going to know where everything for sure landed. But what we do know is that that's going to have a negative impact on our board local levy. And what that means for purposes of us maintaining the level of revenue that we need in order to fund our operations next year is that this paragraph down here where we talk about the $61 property tax increase on an average home in the district being approximately 5%, in order to get to that same revenue number, because this charter school levy increased, we will actually have to do an additional 1% or approximately $13 on an average home. So those numbers would change to about $74 or a 6% increase in order to bring in that same revenue number that we were budgeting for in our general fund. I don't know if any of this makes sense, because I know it gets very, very complicated, and at this point there's a lot of moving parts to it, but we just want to make sure that it's clear what that ask is going to be in August and what that's going to look like, that there's going to be an additional $13 or 1% added to that number as we go into the August hearing. Our voted local levy and capital local levy just have the regular certified rate adjustments, and then the debt service has that adjustment needed to cover those higher costs for our debt service needs in fiscal year 24. But if you look at this rate overall, we're going from a 6.311 to a 6.355. So the overall increase, when you factor all of these pieces into the rate, is not a huge increase. It kind of all, for property taxpayers, I think it all ends up going together, and they look at it as one property tax bill, right? And for the rates that we are over, that we have authority for as a school district, that's increasing by about 0.00050. So we're looking at a very small increase overall in our property tax rate. On the revenue side, when we look at that 6.355, what it's generating in these various levies, we're at about $300.8 million in total that will be generated through the property taxes, the school district levies. And like I said, these are still subject to change. I think most of them are pretty much finalized at this point, but there could be things that change with these as we go through the next week or two and work with the Salt Lake County auditor on what those certified rates will be. So I don't know if there are any clarifying questions about that or anything that the board would like clarified as far as the property taxes go. Okay. Action required tonight again as a review, approving the revised 22-23 budget as published, adopting the 23-24 budget as published, and setting that tax rate to a 0.006355, subject to changes in that basic levy and charter school levy, and then other levies potentially being changed by the certified tax rate. And finally, authorizing a truth and taxation hearing to be held on August 1st. So with that, I will pass it back to you, Nicole, for public comment and board discussion.
All right, thank you. Let's go ahead. Are there any comments or questions from the board at this time? Anything that we need to clarify?
No.
Thanks, Clark.
Julie had some questions. I'm sorry that when I went through this on my own, like, these questions did not come up. Brian or I would have asked you earlier, but I first wanted to tell you thank you for putting together these, the allocation of our budget according to our strategic plan. I loved seeing that up there. And, or maybe that was you, Todd, who put that together. When I saw that up there, I kept thinking, who's under which category? Like, do our electricians know that they are under the student achievement category most likely? Do they know that that's what they are contributing to, you know? And so I hope that at some point people get to self-identify into those categories, because I think that's a really important part of what we're doing here, you know?
Absolutely. So at this point, we were focusing on the incremental increases that are in this particular budget. So that conversation that you've just highlighted will be happening. It didn't happen necessarily in those numbers that you saw on the chart, but we will have those conversations. And it may be that there's a different dimension added onto the strategic plan that has to do with the support services that may not be directly seen in the classroom.
Yeah.
And that it would have its place on that schedule with its performance measures and how it contributes to the overall operations of the district. So there's some conversations still to be had as we move forward.
And I'm happy that plan is fluid. I wanted to just, on your bond schedule there, can you remind me why the shift in that schedule after 2030? Do you know what I'm talking about when I say shift? Yeah, right there.
Yeah, so that's as bonds mature, as we pay those off completely, we will have lower debt service needs as a district. We won't have to pay as much, right? As we get some of those bonds paid off, we're gonna go from 31 million in fiscal year 29 all the way down to 4.8 million by fiscal year 32 in needs for our bonds, just because some are going away, they'll be completely paid off.
Maybe we can have a discussion about that, because I'm looking at this and I'm seeing it's incrementally going down very little, but then all of a sudden, that all of a sudden drop is where my lack of understanding comes. But maybe we can talk about that offline.
Yeah.
Julie,
and
you
figure that out.
pay off the loan. That's when we pay off the
And where do we,
the loan.
where does that money come from for us? You see where my lack of understanding is? So I think I better circle up later with Brent. Our ESSER funds go away this year. Are there places where we have spent ESSER funds on any ongoing expenses where we will miss them next year?
That's a great question, and one that, you know, there's what we say and then what people think, and sometimes those don't exactly line up, right? And so what we've said throughout the whole process is ESSER can only pay for one-time expenditures. And as we hire people, they know they're on a one-year only contract, that there's no expectation that continue past the 1 year. However, everyone out in schools and communities gets used to a certain level of services. And if we start to offer things with those ESSER funds that all of a sudden that money's gone now and the school doesn't have access to that allocation in fiscal year 25, that necessarily creates a little bit of a gap there where the communities don't care what funding source it is that's paying for whatever's going on. They just know that they're receiving certain services at their schools. And so that's going to be a big important thing for principals and schools and the district overall to manage as we go throughout this year, is kind of setting those expectations of like, hey, there are certain things that we're paying for with ESSER that we won't be able to continue to do, or we'll have to maybe make decisions in other areas that, hey, we've got to free up funds here in order to move what we were doing with ESSER money onto a different funding source. So it is the nature of the beast when we have these one-time funding sources, that it's difficult as you wean yourself off of those funding sources and don't have them anymore, that difficult decisions have to be made.
So it sounds like we would be wise to have a communications strategy in place for dealing with that, or helping our principals to deal with those expectations for our patrons as those funds go away, and help them understand what's going to go away and why. Again, I will say to Ben, I will leave it to the expert on that, but.
One of the things that we spent extra funds on was actually communicating with our patrons. I'm totally being honest.
So now what?
It's a challenge, and you're spot on. There are other ways to communicate and address, but to identify potential, there was this whole decline in populations and getting kids back into schools. There was an allowable expenditure, and so we utilized some of those funds in that way. But I'm going to point out that I think the bigger issue here, and I want to compliment, I want the public to understand that everything you see here in this proposed budget isn't what was requested, right? There were a lot of things that were requested that were denied because the funds weren't there, and we didn't have the ability to, I mean, the board is obviously cognizant of a tax increases and very sensitive on that front. And so there were things that had to be declined that would have been shifted to ongoing from ESSER as well. So you're correct. We do need to do a good job of communicating that, but I want the public to understand as well as you adopt this budget that that both the district administration and the board have been cognizant of trying to be fiscally responsible and prudent with these funds.
I had a few other questions, but I didn't want to dominate the conversation if anyone else has.
We know Clark doesn't have any. Kim, do you have any?
Can confirm.
I want to ask about the prioritization of new resources slide. Specifically, the funds being directed toward social skills and dispositions. I know we have that as its own segment in the strategic plan, but my question is more, can you give us some examples of what kinds of programs will be funding in that segment? What criteria is going to qualify something to fall into that segment? That kind of thing.
So there are two particular budget items that fall into that social skills category. The first one falls in the area of tiered interventions, and this was a request that came out of our legal department asking for a civil rights investigator to be brought onto staff to manage the workloads of the hearings and the investigations that need to take place under any of the complaints that fall under Title IX or Title VII. So that's one position there. Another is in the area of attendance. This is in our student learning area. We're looking at an additional teacher to work at our Roosevelt school to work with the students that are needing extra interventions and attentions so that they're successful in their school career. So those are the two items that fall under that category.
Did you have anything else, Kim, or is that okay?
I think that answers my question. Thank you.
Connie, did you have anything? Chris? Karen? Go for it,
Oh,
Julie.
I'm the only question friend. Capital fund. When you talked about the capital fund, you said if there's an excess in that, then we can spend it on technology. Do you know what I'm talking about?
So that would be the debt service fund.
Oh,
Yeah.
excuse me. Which I just assumed went to the capital fund. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I just wondered, wouldn't we want to save that money for other pending projects rather than putting it directly into technology?
So the funds there are actually part of paying our bonds and not, the intent of those funds is not for capital projects, but
Oh, right,
instead
because it's
debt
not
service
capital, it's
needs,
debt
yeah.
service.
And so, yeah.
I'm good. And then I also just wanted a reminder on certified tax rates. We are not the ones who set the valuation. Who is that? Is it the city or the county?
So the Salt Lake County assessor assesses property values, and every county does it a little bit different, but typically you have groups of properties that are assessed at one time. So you'll have, hey, this year this area got hit and there was adjustments there. Sometimes it's more all across the board and the whole county has adjustments that are made. So last year would have been a good example of that because valuations changed so drastically.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of a county-wide thing that there were pretty significant adjustments made. But that's the Salt Lake County assessor that does that.
Okay, that's all. Thanks.
Yep.
Thought of another question, sorry. just to clarify your answer to my last question, how do Title IX investigators fit into social skills category? Like, what's the criteria, justification for that?
So within that category, there were strategic objectives. And one of the strategic objectives was tiered interventions. And so there's the opportunity to have that hearing process tie into what interventions may be needed at the school level.
So, sorry if I'm not following, but saying that, so an incident occurs or a complaint happens, and then the Title IX investigator is helping to, I guess, assure that if there was a behavioral problem that contributed to that issue, we're correcting it. Is that what we're saying?
So now you're asking beyond my ability to describe exactly how it all works together, so I don't know if Doug can jump in and talk about how a Title IX investigation ties in to the broader prospect.
And this goes to policy that we passed some maybe a year ago, and it's the Student Code of Conduct policy. Right now, the Department of Education has passed and then modified Title IX regulations regarding how we do and how we conduct investigations related to complaints of Title IX violations. The process of doing that is pretty onerous, and in our school district, we actually have been very resourceful, I think, in how we've tried to share the responsibility of complying with the Title IX investigation process and the hearing process. But it's simply become undoable. We just need additional help in following that process. So it's a mandated process. It's a process that's mandated by the federal government, by Title IX regulations, and by the Department of Education. And we've been kind of sharing that responsibility with a variety of individuals chipping in and trying to help out with those investigations. But that has become unworkable, and so there's a real need for us to be able to conduct those investigations in a compliant manner. And to what Todd was referring, as part of our code of conduct, we describe that in every instance where there are allegations that are made that are violations of the Student Code of Conduct, we conduct investigations, and that is a part of our tiered systems of intervention. So if we need to get a complete and thorough investigation done in a timely manner so that we can intervene with the student who is the alleged respondent, as well as provide services and help to the alleged complainant in those circumstances. So it's the process of intervening with students. Obviously, we'd like to never have to conduct investigations with respect to some of these civil rights violations, but that is the reality of it, and we're kind of desperate for some help in completing that.
So are you able to give like a hypothetical example of a
Sure.
situation that might happen where we would bring that person in?
Sure. So in a school where, without being too specific, I guess, where we have a student who engages in some kind of sexual harassment or some kind of sexual assault toward another student, we have an obligation under Title IX to investigate that, actually in a very prescriptive way, a way that has been prescribed by the federal government, and it's somewhat of a lengthy process. It's a process that I feel like, the school district was doing pretty well before the regulations changed, but those regulations kind of added additional responsibilities with respect to that circumstance so that we can conduct an investigation, provide both the complainant and the respondent adequate due process as they go through that, those investigations, and make sure that we have an outcome that is the most beneficial for both parties, for the respondent as well as the complainant.
Does that help? I mean, kind of. I'm still feeling like it's a little bit of a stretch, personally, to put it into that bucket, but that's what I'm trying to get out of the questions I'm asking.
Yeah, and I'd love to perhaps show you the student code of conduct. In the student code of conduct, what we do is everything that we do is a tiered intervention for students, and at the highest level of those tiered interventions are some pretty, some pretty intense interventions for kids. And this is an example of one of those fairly intense interventions for kids. Again, that has to do with our multi-tiered systems of support. That is all, our student code of conduct is built on multi-tiered systems of support. And what we're talking about are investigations that occur kind of at the very tip of the third tier of those, of that multi-tiered systems of support. So it does allow us to be able to go through the safe school process and do all the things that we need to do to provide support and services to the kids who, again, who are both are the complainant and the respondent in those circumstances.
Okay. And I think maybe it would be helpful for me if you had maybe a list of, I don't know, different code of conduct violations that could trigger a Title IX investigation.
Sure.
You mentioned if it was a sexual assault already, but if there's others.
Yeah, and we actually discussed them in some relative detail in the code of conduct policy that we could sit down and go through.
I hear you a little bit, Kim. I'm trying over here to connect those same dots that you are. Because in my mind, social skills and dispositions, specific to our strategic plan, dependability, hard work, resilience, those kinds of things. And then I'm over here with the Title IX violations, and I'm trying to I think in my mind, when I'm seeing money put to social skills and dispositions, it's those 5 that we've outlined for the strategic plan, and then all of a sudden over here, now we're talking, horrific behavior that then triggers the Title IX, and I don't know, I'm trying to reconcile that a little bit in my head. So I hear what you're saying, Kim, and I don't disagree. It's a little confusing to try to draw those thoughts.
So I would say social skills and dispositions is that umbrella or that that Title I heading, if you will.
Right.
Title I, not as in federal, but in that Level 1 heading of different things. The characteristics fall under that, as well as this multi-tiered systems of support. So if you think about multi-tiered systems of support, students are going to engage in certain behaviors, all don't receive the same consequence, right? So what is a multi-tiered consequence or intervention that matches the nature of the infraction, right? And if it's truly egregious, then that's going to receive an appropriate level of consequence or intervention.
That's correct. Yeah.
Where if it's a higher, less level of infraction, we wouldn't want to apply, and again, I'm speaking just in general terms, we don't want to apply that same level of consequence for an egregious behavior for something that's less egregious.
That's right.
That's identified under that multi-tiered systems of support. Now, what I also hear, though, is what actually qualifies for a Title IX investigation, right?
Sure.
That would trigger that, and then that part of that investigation would then determine what is the appropriate level per code of conduct or behavior or social skill that would then fall under the appropriate level of a consequence associated for the infraction.
Yeah, and I think as you described it, it is on a continuum. And we have what you've described, Karen, are very low-level interventions that we apply when there's when we need to correct behavior and help kids develop the kinds of skills that would hopefully prevent what we're discussing. However, on the other end of the spectrum, there are those circumstances where we do have to intervene with much higher level intervention, and that's an example of this. But it is a continuum in the multi-tiered systems of support. And so I agree that while we're trying to prevent behavior issues from happening. There are behavior issues that occur, and we have to intervene at the appropriate level when they do.
So I guess I'll just read it as social skills and dispositions and behaviors. Maybe that,
Sure.
like, I wrap my mind around that a little bit. Anyway, okay, I'm done.
Julie, are you?
I think when you use the word intervention, we're talking about correcting behavior, right? And the idea is to bridge that concept is we're trying to teach them those skills that would be appropriate. And so that's how it kind of ties back into that category into the strategic plan. So comparably, the other position ties into providing that intervention and support to help that student who's committed an egregious act to learn those skills necessary to be successful in an educational environment.
Okay. All right, we're going to go ahead and move on to our public hearing part of this. Ben, do you have the list?
May I solicit any additional comments for the public hearing portion? I have the sign-up sheet here. If anybody else is dying to speak in the public hearing portion on the budget itself, please let me know and I will add you to the list. Otherwise,
Just a reminder as we start this that this is specifically for the budget. This is not for other things to be addressed during this time. I'm going to read this. Certain actions taken by the Board of Education require public hearing. During a public hearing, Granite School District patrons, employees, students, and residents may provide comment on the topic of that subject of the hearing. So this is specifically for the hearing of the budget. We have one person signed up, so we're going to invite Michelle Jones to come on up. Please state your name and where you live, and 3 minutes to address the board. Thank you.
My name is Michelle Jones. I live at 3710 South, 500 East. It's late, and you guys have been talking about this a lot, which is awesome. I'm also GEA president, the proud representative of GEA. And we would like to voice our support for this budget, and especially for the $4 an hour increase to our classified brothers and sisters. Let's do another woot woot. We depend on them to keep our schools and classrooms functioning and ensure that students receive the best education possible. So we support this.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you for your support on that. All right. With no other comments, we will go ahead and close that portion of it and move on. Are there any further questions or comments on the budget from the board? Brian, will you go to the last slide?
yes.
Thank you. So will you please all look at that? We have really four, but three motions that we need to have made tonight. The first two are as outlined right there. The third one I've asked Chris, because there's some specific language that was left out of that one. But those are the three motions that we have tonight, so I will entertain a motion.
I move that we approve the revised 2022-2023 budget as published.
I'll second it.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve the revised 2022-2023 budget as published. Is there any further questions, discussion, or comments? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, that passes. Second motion up there is to adopt the proposed 2023-2024 budget. We do need to have all of that language included on the motion. Can you read it, Kim?
I have a slightly different one, so I don't know if you want me to do it or not, but my motion would be to adopt the budget without the prioritization to social skills and dispositions as described in that slide. So, don't know if you want me to read that whole thing.
So would you just leave out that money, or would you have it reallocated somewhere?
Yeah, reallocated probably to academic, but we'd have to agree on that, I suppose, as a board. But yeah, I would not want to approve it with that piece in it. I think it shouldn't be a surprise to anyone on the board. I think I've made clear on multiple occasions my views on that aspect. And to be clear for everyone here, and transparent, I voted to ratify negotiations. I fully support the increases in pay. This is not about that at all. But this one piece for me is a bit of a sticking point on the budget as a whole.
So can I just ask, I don't know if it's a clarifying question for you or for you, but so if it's a reallocation or just maybe putting that fund in a different category, Kim, right? That would not change the tax rate. Am I correct in saying that? So your issue isn't with the tax rate, it's with how the funds within those budgets. So that's more administrative, I guess. Am I right there? But yet, we're the fiduciary board. Can you clarify that for me, Todd?
So as I understand it, the motion would be to adopt this proposed language with the amendment, even though we don't have a main motion in front of us, but with the additional language of reducing or reallocating that portion of money that is identified as social skills and dispositions. Did I get that kind of close? So it's basically all of this and then a reallocation of those dollars under that category.
So we could still hire them. I mean, it would still be FTE.
Well, that would be
That's the question.
that would be the intent of Member Chandler as to whether the dollar, if we're just changing labels versus authorizing FTE.
That's right.
So Kim, I guess the question is it just the fact that it's called social skills and dispositions, or is it the actual position that you have an objection to?
I think it's generally both, because the intent of the position is really the interventions, as we discussed.
So it's my understanding that the intent of that position is to help in investigations that have to do with some of the egregious things that happen in our schools, sexual assault, things like that. And your objection is you don't agree that we should be spending money on investigating those things?
In investigating them as interventions under an MTSS program. Not saying we shouldn't investigate those things or spend money on it. I think the way we have the program structured is what, as I've expressed in the past, MTSS, PBIS, they all go together. And they're things that I have concerns with. So I guess, get back to your question then, right? If we were reallocating the funds and hiring a position to help investigate issues, I could probably think about that and get comfortable with that a little better.
So let's say, what if it was more adding FTE to Doug's department as far as, he's the one, his department does the investigation. So what if it's not under this social skills umbrella, but more in the legal department because he's working hand in hand with those investigating these egregious, behaviors? Would you support that as far as maintaining the FTE, but maybe just not allocating it to that fund? To that umbrella?
Right, yeah.
Do you see what I'm getting
I
at?
think we could reword the motion maybe to reallocate the socialization portion, right? That's specific to social skills and dispositions. If we're allocating the funds as you described.
And more just maybe the legal department, since it's an investigation.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Remember too, that these are not, can you change to that prioritization of new resources slide? That's not necessarily, these are not budget categories. This is just where they're being prioritized. So this actually is not even a part of the fiscal document, really, is it? It's just in here for our slides.
Yeah, so this is a lens by which you can look at the budget or interpret the budget. The dollars will actually be in the general fund under salaries and benefits. So, and that's as far as it goes as the numbers relate to it. The rest is just how do we convey what we're doing with those dollars.
So this is a reporting idea where that money is going, but it's not necessarily an official, title.
Correct. This is an alignment to the strategic. So when you look at the strategic plan as a document and we start identifying resources going to the strategic plan, this would be an activity, if you will, or an FTE that would fit within the strategic plan. So we're talking about its alignment within the strategic plan. Now, the legal office as a whole, we haven't gone into base budget, so this exercise hasn't pushed into the full budget. It's just been these incremental additions. We probably, based on this conversation, have a deeper need to understand how do support services fit into the strategic plan. Do they fit into these three priority areas, or do they have their own area of priority which accomplishes support services?
And Kim, I wonder if you would be willing to pass the budget minus this slide.
Well, this isn't, I think what you're saying, though, is this is not part of the budget. This is just for our information. This is more an
That's what I'm trying to say,
informational
too, because
I think it's a question, this isn't binding.
thing. Right.
Right? I mean, this is kind of, I think we're a little bit into semantics right now, because
Yeah,
this
same.
isn't binding that money has to go to this category and be labeled as this. This is all general fund money that's basically going to our strategic plan. So if you look at it, 100% of it is going to our strategic plan. And I think the rest of it is a little bit semantics, but
The
maybe
budget
that's
that the-
oversimplifying, I don't know.
As the board adopts a budget, it's done by object code. So you're approving expenditures, salaries, right? The 100 object codes are the salaries and the 200s are benefits. And there are dollar amounts assigned to every single one of those object codes in the budget. And that's what you're approving when you approve a budget for the upcoming year.
Leslie, did you want to add something?
Well, if I could clarify, another thing that's listed underneath the social skills and dispositions priority is just a teacher at the GAP site. So that, honestly, that teacher teaches academics, but because it was categorized in social skills and dispositions, it doesn't necessarily explain what the position is going to be. It was just placed in a category because it comes from prevention and student placement, and they've been working on the social skills and dispositions priority.
So what if we adjusted to say, approve with the understanding that we will discuss further allocation question before committing funds?
Yeah, the lens question, because that, as Todd has mentioned, this is just a lens through which to look. And so that's why we just need to understand if there's concern there or with the actual positions. As has been mentioned, Title IX investigations were under obligation per law to conduct, right? And they become of such nature that we need additional FTE to help us do those in a way that satisfies that obligation. And the other part is that Roosevelt teacher, right? So if the question is not to do those positions, then that does change how it is we allocate those resources. If the question is just the label that's over that's certainly, that's certainly open for future discussion especially as the board continues to work through their mission, vision, priorities as well. That lens can certainly be adjusted. But so anyway, that's understanding is the concern with the Roosevelt teacher position and the Title IX position, or is it more the label of it? And so, a motion could be made to approve it depends wherein lies the concern of the board. Is it with the positions, or is it with the lens?
It seems to me, Kim, like it's not necessarily the positions that you have a concern with, but just more the label that we've given it here, correct? Is that...
Yeah, I mean,
that we need to have an investigator is not your objection. It's just more that we're tying it into MTSS and that thing. Am I reading that right?
Yeah, generally speaking, I think.
Okay, so since that's not necessarily part of the budget, then that could be something that we could talk about in the future, have a conversation about, but that does not necessarily, it's not necessarily tied to the budget as we would pass it in this way.
Okay, so you're saying we wouldn't need to make a motion with any exception, and we would still revisit this at
Unless
a
you
later
have
time?
an actual objection to the position, the
I think she's saying that when we approve the budget as per the language here, it does not approve what's on this slide.
yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Okay, yeah.
It's
that's my
simply, it's the tax rate, it's those fine details, and
It's
then
that
the
we're-
discussion.
Thank you.
We're giving, yes, that we're
Therefore-
giving 85% to personnel. That's what we're approving, not necessarily the label that we're giving it. Does that make sense?
So I'd like to make a motion that we adopt the proposed 2023-24 budget as published and set the tax rate to 0.006355, subject to the following. The basic levy and charter school levy will be adjusted to the rates established by the Utah Tax Commission, and other levies will be adjusted for any changes in the calculation of the certified tax rate as sent by the Salt Lake County Auditor.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to adopt the proposed 2023-2024 budget as published and set the tax rate to 0.006355, subject to the following. The basic levy and charter school levy will be adjusted to the rates established by the Utah Tax Commission. Other levies will be adjusted for changes in the calculation of the certified tax rate as set by the Salt Lake County Auditor. Any further discussion, questions, comments? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. And then our third.
I'd like to make a motion that we authorize a truth and taxation hearing to be held at Granite District offices at 6 p.m. on August 1st, 2023.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to hold and to authorize a truth and taxation hearing, to be held at the district office at 6 p.m. on August 1st, 2023. Any further questions, discussion, or comments? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. I think that's it. I now need a motion to close the budget hearing and reconvene the general session.
Seconded.
All right, we have a motion and a second to close the budget hearing and reconvene general session. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. All right, thank you. Thank you, those of you who were here for the budget.
May I suggest that we do the administrative
We
appointments
have
first
people
and then
who
take
have
a
been
recess?
here for over 2 hours
that's the
waiting for the
consent.
admin appointments. Bless
That
you
means we have to
guys.
do the consent part.
So can we do the consent before we recess?
Can I just make a motion?
As point of order, we do have granted elected officials participation time and paid participation time before that.
Oh.
Let's do it. So,
Do we have people signed up?
Can we do the consent agenda first?
We have to.
I
Do we have to go in order?
I believe I can move that, can't I? Okay. All right. Let's go ahead then and do the consent agenda so we can get people out of here.
I move that we accept the consent agenda.
I second it.
All right.
Before we vote, I was under the impression we had some people here who wanted to comment related to our agenda.
On issues related to consent agenda.
Oh, that might be an issue with moving the consent agenda up,
Yeah.
Yeah.
if they're here to comment.
We do have one
Monica,
individual
is
who
that,
signed up
are you
for-
shaking your head? Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, Monica.
So we need to reverse that, I
Okay.
think.
We're going to hold on that motion then and go back to patron participation time. And Monica will invite you up for public comments. Go ahead and step up to the microphone. Make sure you talk really loud into that. And put your name and your address.
Okay, my name is Monica Wilbur, and you have my address. I'd like to thank you for this opportunity to address the board tonight. I'd like to talk about the moral hazard, that is Panorama, which is the platform that Granite has chosen for social emotional learning surveillance on the students in this district. I get that State Code 53G 4207 allows the districts to collect behavioral data and other highly subjective, non-academic and behavioral intervention data on children under the pretext of monitoring for at-risk factors. But let's be honest, thanks to the district's lingering COVID and diversity, equity, and inclusion policies, schools are now treating all kids as at risk by default. This means that Granite schools are continuously collecting not just attendance data on our kids, but social and emotional data on their attitudes and behaviors as well. This psychosocial data is not just collected through surveys, which parents can opt out of, but through multiple modalities, including teacher observations, computerized check-ins and checkouts, and intervention implementation. A student's social emotional data can then be intersected with other personal data points, like a student's ethnicity, the student's family's income and education levels, the student's gender, etc., to create a comprehensive data profile that can be disaggregated to justify more school programs that have little to do with academics, but a lot to do with increasing the amount of data collected on our kids to tightly control their experiences both in and out of school. The Panorama Ed Data Dashboard prejudices educators toward drawing a direct connection between a student's academic performance with his social emotional data. In other words, educators may be falsely attributing a student's academic difficulties with socio-emotional factors that have nothing to do with the student's struggle to understand the differences between adverbs and adjectives, as one example. Teachers are expected to read into these numerical scores on the Panorama dashboard a sort of mystical understanding of a child's cultural influences upon his or her learning, and then divine the proper multi-tiered interventions accordingly. One of these types of interventions that Panorama encourages is PBIS, Positive Behavioral Interventions and Supports. PBIS, as an intervention approach, according to multiple Granite board members in a meeting a few months ago, has been sending students the message that bad behavior will be rewarded instead of mitigated. There's a multitude of other privacy and informed consent issues with other tiered intervention approaches like MTSS, as this board just discussed, which the Panorama platform supports extensively. You as a board may not have a choice in implementing an early warning system in this district, but it doesn't have to be Panorama, even if the state board does subsidize this platform for this district. And as a parent, I am under no statutory obligation to authorize the collection of this highly subjective data on my two children in this district. It would be reasonable to expect that the district ensure that it instructs its administrators to respect, protect, and further the interests of parents by honoring requests to exempt their students from their involuntary inclusion in the Panorama social emotional surveillance system. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Monica. Okay. Christina, did you want to speak before we do our consent agenda?
I'm happy to speak whenever. It's up to you guys.
I just wanted to double check.
Thank you for considering me, but whenever is fine.
Okay. All right. We will go ahead then and go on. We had a motion and a second on accepting the consent agenda. Is there any questions, comments?
Well, I think I'm the person who made the motion on the consent agenda, but I'd love to hear, Rich, what you have to say about some of those points that Monica made, which, you know, things especially about opting in and being exempt, data collection, connection of data collection to academic information, and whatever else you can remember from, because I should have taken notes. That was a lot of good information.
Yeah, and so, yes, if, Board President, thanks. So I appreciate the question and the concerns, share several of them. Working with the State Board of Education on the contract with Panorama, making sure that there's student data protections and privacy is in place, decrypted at the aggregate, things like that. I'd be happy to sit down and discuss at length how it's used. When the bill was originally passed in 2017, there were some protections. In 2022, I worked with the bill sponsor and a parent group over some of their concerns, and we added some additional protections in there. And so there is opt-out provisions associated with it, but it really functions as an early warning system. As has been mentioned, that does bring in elements of a student survey, and we don't seek to hide anything there that is made available. We would make it available even before the law change in 2022 to parents. They can see that, see what those questions are, and they can opt out if they're uncomfortable with that, as well as it brings in attendance data and academic data. So it's coordinating systems, and it's to an early warning system. So as far as the contract with the State Board of Education, those are vetted by the Attorney General's office to make sure that there are level protections associated with that student data privacy. As far as Panorama having access to Utah, and I would say Granite School District students, they do not have that access. So it's encrypted and held at the aggregate. The personally identifiable information is removed. For Panorama, they don't have access to that unless, again, the State Board of Education determines at such point that they would have a need for it, and that's taken on a case-by-case basis at USBE. And so for us and the utility of using it, what it has informed for us is one, to elevate, primary objective, to elevate the student voice in determining and sharing with us how they're experiencing school. And that's taken at multiple points, recognizing we're looking to elevate the student's voice, and this helps us do that, and in coordination with the academic data points and other things that have been mentioned. But happy to sit down and have the discussion. But for us to be able to use it, we have seen increases in attendance when we are engaging students at that level. Teachers, part of it is making sure that they have positive relationships with students, so that students, when they show up at class, they feel like they want to be in class. And it just really helps identify how are we meeting the needs of students better. Early warning systems generally have shown nationally where the implemented well, we're able to intervene at an earlier state to get them on track for graduation, and not just graduate, but graduate being well prepared for life after school. And so there's a lot of points there that we can discuss. Again, I share, and I don't mean this to be patronizing, I share some of the concerns associated with that, having been still am a father of public ed children, is to make sure that, one, those data protections there too, and that it is used appropriately and not inappropriately. But anyway, this is newer to our district, having launched it in several schools last year. Seeing what that implementation is, and then still building the framework for its appropriate use moving into the future for our district. And that's what this second iteration really seeks to accomplish on the consent.
Does this data follow a student from year to year?
No, so a lot of the academics piece does, but that's in the student information system, right? When it comes to like behavioral, like a student has an infraction, there's something that they've done that they shouldn't, those interventions only apply to that year.
Or the survey data?
Yeah, so no.
Doesn't follow.
No, so they'll be able to.
And it's not on a transcript anywhere?
No.
And nobody can access it except for Granite?
That's right.
District?
And I would say not even through Granite District, so only the school site can access school site information. And only those students for which they have a vested educational interest in, meaning someone wouldn't be able to access the data of another student in another class that's not theirs.
I was in a community council meeting at one of our pilot schools recently, where they were giving feedback about about Panorama to their principal, and they had some things that they would want to change about the way that they organized it. But there were many examples given in which students made gains based on information that the teacher learned from the Panorama survey. Like, oh, I didn't realize this. And so we dealt with this social emotional thing, and then could now address the academic piece because this other part was being addressed. And so I felt like, I feel really great about this program. I feel like it's something that will help our students make the gains they need and help us understand the bridges that we need to cross better for them.
I would just add, I've seen data slides, pictures that to me appeared to show aggregated student data that were at the state level. And so some of the things I've seen seem to contradict with some of the things I'm hearing. So I still personally am very concerned about Panorama. You know, even just for the fact that, I've said this before, the system is there, it's in place to help basically modify behavior and to align to the standards that we determine are correct, and the state should never be dictating beliefs, attitudes, and personalities. So my intent was to put forward a motion to approve the consent agenda without the Panorama contract. In addition, just coincidentally, without the University of Utah contract, just because I feel like that's one I need to know more information about before I vote on it. I did reach out about it, and you may have responded, but I have not had a chance yet to see that. I would like to see that before I vote on it. So my intent was going to be to propose a motion without those two items.
What was the second one, Kim? I'm trying to find what the...
Contract with the University of Utah for mental health support.
Oh.
Those are for our unit kids, correct?
Correct. Those are for for students under CBTU units, thank you, where they're receiving special education services to provide free and appropriate public education per their IEP, and those services for those most acute and severe behavioral and emotional behaviors, given special education law, have to be provided to provide free and appropriate public education, and that's where the University of Utah contracts for those highly specialized services.
Is that a contract that we can see?
Sure.
Can be shared?
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. If there's no further questions or discussion, okay. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Right, we have a pass of 6 and one vote of no. With that, we are going to turn the time over to, thank you for being patient, you guys. John, take it over. Take it away.
Board of Education and those members of ELT that are still awake. Oh, I'm sorry, that are still here with us. It's my privilege at this time to introduce to you some new appointments. And we appreciate all three of them and their families for being so patient. First of all, we'd like to start off by introducing you to Sarah Wall. If we could have Sarah stand. Sarah is currently serving as the assistant principal at Kearns High School, but previously she has served as a special education teacher at Jefferson Junior High in our district. She was also an intern assistant principal at Calvin Smith Elementary, and she served previously as the assistant principal at Westlake STEM Junior High, which she will be the principal of next year. Congratulations, Sarah. Sarah, who did you bring with you tonight?
So this is my husband, Salone Wall. We did leave our kids at home. We have 4 kids and 2 grandchildren, and they're not with us tonight. But I also wanted to thank Danny Sterling for coming and hanging out with us tonight versus work.
That's fantastic. We appreciate you being here tonight. Thank you. Okay.
We owe like a Crave cookie or something, I don't know. But
We owe them
something.
something big time, I think.
We owe you a
And they
crumble,
owe their
Sarah.
loved ones like dinner or something for sure. Okay, next up we have Allison. If we can have Allison. And Allison, is it gosh or gosh? Gosh, good. Thought I had it. Okay, Allison is currently serving as the assistant principal at or intern assistant principal at Eisenhower Junior High. She also taught for us in our Granite Connection High School, our alternative program, but she will be serving as the assistant principal at Copper Hills Elementary and West Kearns Elementary Schools next year. Congratulations, Allison. And Allison, I think your husband had to, oh, he did make it back. Okay. They have a newborn, so I think he had to run home for a bit, but he made it back, right? Yes. Okay, so please introduce who you got here tonight.
This is Stefan. He's my husband.
Great.
He took our daughter to school, who's also our older daughter. They're hopefully sleeping now.
Great. We're glad you could be here. All right. Next up, we have Annie Orton. We're going to have Annie stand. Annie has been serving currently as the instructional coach at Olympus High School. She was also an instructional coach and avid coordinator at Matheson Junior High previously, and she was a math teacher and an instructional coach at Cedar High High School. Annie will be the assistant principal at Rolling Meadows Elementary and South Kearns Elementary next year. Annie, please introduce who you have with you today.
I brought my husband Jeremy, my parents Lori and Ron, my sister Heidi, my two stepdaughters checked out a little while ago. And I'm bringing Jessica anytime anything good happens because she just is a good support of everything. Now on my crew.
That's great.
I'm going out for ice cream with them. I know.
That's fantastic. Annie actually has two members of her family that work in Granite as well. Her sister Heidi is a principal, and her husband serves in our police department. So it's great that they're all in the family. I'll keep it all in the family. So congratulations to all of you. Thank you so much for your patience tonight, and please go enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your patience in staying, and we're thrilled to have you in these new positions.
If you want to leave, you are very welcome.
Please feel free. I know that policy is a riveting part of this meeting. Doug's going to be offended because
Board of Education, I'm sorry, I failed to mention that we also had a transfer. So Becky Dees is being transferred to be the assistant at Kearns High School to replace Sarah. Okay.
All right, thank you. Okay, we're going to jump back real fast. Christina, I apologize. How do you say your last name?
Bogus.
Bogus? Okay. I think I've said it 4 different ways in my head, and so I apologize for that.
Oh. I'm not used to this.
Thank you for being here.
Oh, well, thank you, and thank you for being concerned about how my name is pronounced, because some people are not. It's just a thing. I am happy to be here tonight, and thank you for the opportunity to address the board. I really actually have to hand it to you. Part of the reason I'm here is because I got a mailer. And I thought, man, I've been expecting and wanting to go to a board meeting in Granite for months. And it was a wonderful reminder that this is an opportunity, and my calendar was free. So thank you for those, because I don't know if everybody appreciates them, but I appreciate them, and I would like to sign up for every month when those go out. All right. And had I known I was going to speak, I would have curled my hair, but I did not know that I was going to speak tonight. I just want to thank you for your time as a public servant. I know you can't do anything right, so we appreciate what you do and how you serve. And if I can help you and support you in any way, I've had the pleasure of working with some of your staff as we've debated issues on different levels. And just let me know how I can engage and have conversations with you in a fruitful and productive way. So thank you. I won't take any more of your time. I know you have plenty to do, but thank you for your time. I will ping pong into Jordan in the August meeting, but thank you for allowing me to be here tonight, and thank you for allowing me to speak. I appreciate it.
Thank you, and thank you for your service. And I know you sit through much longer board meetings than we do, so.
Just pray on those days of the month.
So thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
All right. We are going to go to Doug for our first reading of Article 9A2M, corrective action, progressive discipline, and orderly termination.
That's right. Just starting tonight, right? We're just getting started.
Yeah.
Most exciting part is yet to come.
3-minute break?
Oh, you know what? Go ahead. Do you want to propose that?
Well, I'd be
Saunter, a
happy if Doug
5-minute
just kept
saunter.
going, but I think in fairness to him and everybody else, I'll propose a 3-minute break.
Do you want to make that 5 minutes?
No, let's make it 3.
A 3-minute saunter?
We don't have to vote.
minutes. So we're going to go ahead and come back. Are we good over there? Okay. And when everybody else will join us, they will join us. Oh, except Doug's not here. Doug,
We're past 3 minutes.
you're being paged. That was, your 10 minutes was.
Okay. Board members,
There's a.
Something's happening.